Hey guys, so I've gotten a few questions about this problem. It's number 86. We did talk about this in office hours, so if you weren't able to make those, I'm going to show you guys here the best way to solve this. So this problem, especially the first part, is a lot more simple than you guys are thinking. So let's take a look, let's read it and work through it. It says Lamar has a list of 600 pages to read to finish his book for his upcoming book report. He sets a goal to read half of the pages left in his book each day. How many pages will Lamar have to read the first day to meet his goal? How many will he have to read after 3 days? Okay, let's take a look. So we know that he's starting with 600 pages. First question that we're being asked is how many pages will he have to read the first day to meet his goal? Well, he wants to read half of the pages left in his book each day. So if he's reading half, this will tell us how much he's going to read on the first day. So on the first day, if we do 600 times 1/2, this is day 1, we know he's going to have to read 300. Now, that means that he has 300 pages when he goes to read the second day. So remember that he wants to read half each day. So if we want to figure out on the second day how much he has to read, all we're going to do is 1/2 again. So this is the second day. So we had 600, we took 1/2, that was 30. Then we took 1/2 again on the second day. That'll give us 150 pages. On the third day, again, he wants to read half of what's left each day. So he's going to read another half of the pages on day 3, which means he's going to read 75 pages. So on day 3, he's going to read 75 pages. Now, this next part, part B, gets a little trickier, and I want to remind you guys of the negative exponent rule. So remember that when we have 1 over, I'm just going to use a to the nth power, this is the same thing as a to the negative nth power. So for example, if we had 1 over 3 squared, that is the same thing as 3 to the negative 2 power. So let's take and keep this in mind as we work through this next section. So it says, how many pages will he need to read on day 8? Well, just like we did in the beginning when we did times 3, we're going to do the same thing here, but we're going to do times 8 days. So this is day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now, what we have to think about here is how we can write this in 2 different ways. Now, you guys can calculate this out and figure out 600 times 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, 8 times. You can figure out that answer, or we can think about 2 different expressions. So they're asking us to do 2 different expressions. Notice that when we wrote this out, we multiplied 1/2 by itself 8 times. If we were multiplying, let's say, the number 4 by itself 8 times, we would write that as 4 to the 8th power. We can do the exact same thing with 1/2. So we can rewrite this as 600 times 1/2 to the 8th power. Now, let's take a look here. When we're writing exponents that include fractions, we can move on to writing this as a negative exponent. So when it says write 2 different expressions, well, we just wrote one. Here's the first one. Let's take a look at how we can write this in a different way. And we're going to write it using those negative exponents. So if we're going to do 1 over a to the n equals a to the negative n. So let's take a look at what we've got here. We have our fraction, right? We have that our fraction here is being written as 1/2 to the 8th power. Remember that that's an inverse. That is an inverse, which means that we can also write this as 600 times 2 to the negative 8 power. We can write that as 1/2. We can write 1/2 to the 8th power as 2 to the negative 8 because we just took the reciprocal of that 1/2 made it into 2, and then we had our -8 here. So just like when they're asking us to write 2 different ways, these are 2 different ways that we can write that same equation. Now you can then go through and you can evaluate either one of these expressions. These are your 2 expressions. 600 times 1/2 to the 8th power, or 600 times 2 to the -8th power. Because remember that 1/2 to the 8th power is the same thing as 2 to the -8th power. That's what this rule right here tells us. So we just wrote that expression in 2 different ways, and you guys can now go through and you can evaluate either one of those expressions to answer how many pages will he need to read on day